Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Turin here, and welcome to our first entry in our Tournament Cast series. So this is going to be a new series on the channel, as the title infers, wherein I simply cast tournament games. So again, in this particular tournament, which was the Total Warhammer Cup number 2, I'll be casting a matchup between the Greenskins and the Dwarves. So again, before we begin, I would like to sincerely thank Shetland Apache, who I believe was the administrator and also ran that tournament, for sending me all of these replays. He definitely sent me quite a few, so I'm looking forward to casting all of those for you guys in the next few weeks, and hopefully it'll give you guys a pretty good perspective on the competitive metagame. So in this particular matchup, this was actually the finals. So this is game number 1 of the final series. I figured, hey, let's start with the good stuff. Let's go right to the end, skip all the nonsense. It's kind of like in Lord of the Rings when you skip all of the Hobbit scenes just to get to the battles. That's what's going on here, guys. So you guys enjoy this particular matchup, and let's get right down to it. So the Greenskins over here are going to be piloted by Ondjage, definitely a very, very high level player, and he's also playing against another very high level player who is SK1OA Brent Verlin. So definitely going to be a good time, guys. Two of my favorite factions going at it, and let's get right down to the army compositions. So as far as the Greenskin player goes, he has a bunch of Black Orcs, which obviously is a very, very good choice against the Dwarves. Armor piercing, very, very heavy hitting. On top of that, he does have the Mangy Marauders, and I love this pick. The Mangy Marauders are, again, very, very mobile, which, again, is a very useful tool against the Dwarves, who are a very immobile faction, but more importantly, they have armor-piercing missiles. So these missiles can do a lot of work against gyrocopter harass, can really help to shut that, all that kind of funny business down. On top of that, he actually did bring an Orc War Boss, and he does have a Potion of Toughness, no Potion of Foolhardiness, but again, he does have a Foe Seeker, but he does not have Deadly Onslaught. So the Wyvern is also a pretty good pick, because again, a lot of Dwarf players, at least from my experience on ladder, have been going in really deep with gyrocopters and all that kind of funny business. So again, having the Mangy Marauders, perhaps some Goblin Archers, I'm not sure if he has any in this particular build, is definitely, a very useful tool for shutting down this gyrocopter harass. On top of the Black Orcs, he actually does have an Orc Boar Chariot over here. So these are the armor-piercing anti-infantry chariot with a charge bonus of 80 and 40 weapon strength. Definitely very, very strong against the Dwarves if you can get it in without taking a lot of missile fire. But the gyrocopters, these brimstone guns with the anti-large armor-piercing missiles, are going to be very, very effective at hopefully chasing those down for the Dwarf player. Aside from that, he does have the Hammer of Gork back here, which does have, what is that particular ability called? Let's go ahead and look. It's the Great Green Wallop. So it reduces their accuracy, their melee attack, and melee defense capabilities. So against the Dwarves, that's going to be a pretty useful tool, whereas, the leadership hit against the Dwarves wouldn't have been as useful, with the Goblobber, but these particular stats, lowering their melee defense and their melee attack and accuracy, all are things which are pretty pertinent to the Dwarves. So aside from his main army here, he does also have a group of nasty Skulkers vanguarded very, very far away from the battle, but again, he didn't know where his opponent was going to deploy, and unfortunately for these nasty Skulkers over here, they did deploy on essentially the far side of the map over here. He also does have another group of vanguarded nasty Skulkers over here, if I'm not mistaken. Let's go ahead and find them, and they're down here in the forest. Definitely have a very, very good position on this Dwarf backline. You can see there's some Rangers back here. He does have some Slayers on guard duty, but again, a very vulnerable backline here. As far as the Dwarf player's army composition goes, he does have some gyrocopters with brimstone guns, which I actually like here. The bombs are quite effective. The armor piercing is good. It can deal with Black Orcs, but also it does pretty well against Cav, and also can do well against the Orc War Boss, assuming he's not flying after him, definitely in a pretty hot pursuit there. Aside from that, he does have the Sky Hammer, so a very, very interesting pick here. It does have 400 missile damage. That's pretty strong, and it is armor piercing. It can carry quite a few bombs. So if used well and microed correctly, this thing can do quite a bit of damage to a very condensed Greenskin army. So we'll see how our Dwarf player does here with that. Aside from that, he does have a third gyrocopter with the brimstone gun. You can see the Mangy Marauders are actually putting in some serious work. You can see they've done massive HP damage, doing about 25% already. So again, these Mangy Marauders, for how much they cost, are a very, very good deterrent to the Dwarf Air Force harass. As far as the main Dwarf army goes, he has kind of gotten a nice high ground here, and this is a very, very good terrain situation for the Dwarves. Because again, one of the huge weaknesses of the Dwarves is dealing with terrain and kind of people circumventing your flanks and just harassing, from all such angles. But again, this is a very, very good situation for the Dwarf player, as he does have these two kind of natural lips right here, which will keep him from being flanked and will really, hopefully for him, allow these missile units to thrive. But again, the Greenskin player does have these nasty Skulkers back here, so very, very strong stuff there. But he does have the Grumbling Guard in the front line. He has Longbeards with great weapons all across the front line. These guys are obviously here to battle with the Orcs, or not the Orcs, but more specifically the Black Orcs. In the secondary line, he does have additional Longbeards. I believe these ones, are they just regular Longbeards? They are indeed. So if for some reason, Ondjage decided to bring, goblins or some sort of a Gobbo-centric army, these guys would be a little bit more cost effective at trading with them than these particular not Grumbling Guard, but Longbeards with great weapons would be. On top of that, he does have a Runesmith, and he actually does have a Rune Lord, so he's not on the anvil, so he can be knocked around. So if the Greenskin player decides to come in with, Wyvern or anything like that, this Rune Lord can be knocked out of his formation, so that's definitely something to watch for in this particular battle. On top of that, he does have some Rangers who are indeed hidden. So again, the Greenskin player can't see these at the moment. He does also have Ulthar's Raiders, who are the Regiment of Renown Rangers with great weapons. These guys can hit pretty hard, and they do have a pretty interesting ability here. It is called Marked by Ulthar. So it does minus 22% missile resistance, minus 16 armor, and minus 24 missile parry with shields, of course. So this is a very, very good pick against the Arachnarok Queen, because you're able to debuff it, which then allows these Rangers, who again don't have the highest traditional armor piercing damage. I believe it's pretty low. Let's go ahead and take a look before the battle starts. But again, the armor piercing stat, let's go ahead and see. Oh, we have to go to the weapon strength. There's somewhere, I believe. Yes, missile damage. So again, their armor piercing is pretty low with 4, so it's very, very bad against heavily armored targets. But still, with these guys, that can definitely help. And these guys themselves do have armor piercing, so a very good tool against their Ragnarok Queen. On top of that, he does have some Dragonback Slayers, and that is pretty much it. So let's get right down to business, guys, and see how this battle turns out. So you can see the Dwarf player is kind of doing some bombing runs right now. These Gyrocopters with the Brimstone guns are bombing off the Hammer of Gork crew and also shooting them down. So very, very well played here, kind of disrupting the Hammer, which is a pretty good tool against the entrenched Dwarves. But you can see the Morgrub's Mangy Marauders are, it's kind of a tongue twister. The Morgrub's Mangy Marauders are coming in and deterring these Gyrocopters. They did a pretty good job doing some substantial damage to that group in the back, but again, Gyrocopters are kind of taking groups and have done pretty heavy damage to this Hammer of Gork here, which is now shaken. The main Greenskin infantry line is pushing up. Again, this is a very, very tough position to advance on when the Dwarves are entrenched like this, and the Skyhammer has pulled back, which is pretty smart. It's definitely going to want the cover of this missile fire so that it doesn't get chased down by this Orc Warboss. But again, the Dwarf player is still continuing to harass with these Gyrocopters with the Brimstone guns back here. So they're taking quite a bit of damage. They are wavering, and if he can get rid of these before the battle starts, that's going to save the Dwarves a lot of stress over the course of the battle. Because even a single armor-piercing siege unit like this, especially a Regiment of Renown, can do quite a bit of work. But still, his Gyrocopters are being chased down by the Orc Warboss as well as the Marauders, and probably won't be long for this world. On top of that, the Orc Boar Chariot is kind of just parked right here, waiting for its orders, and I believe the Nasty Skulkers were finally able to make it over from the Shadow Realm over here and are back in action. So this Skyhammer here looks like it's coming in for a bombing run, but it does pass the front line. You can see that Ondjage kind of makes a formation here to dodge the bombing run. Very, very good stuff. A bit of a Matrix move, definitely approved of that. But he does bring in the Skyhammer, but this Orc Warboss lays an absolute smacking on it. It is able to drop a bomb and disrupt this Hammer of Gork, but the Hammer of Gork is still online despite all this. Its leadership is -12, and it has finally broken. So definitely, he did get rid of the Hammer of Gork. It probably won't be coming back with the Skyhammer and these Gyrocopters kind of alternating fire on it, but he is taking massive damage on the Skyhammer. And the Skyhammer itself is an extremely expensive unit. So if he's going to lose this investment right out of the gates, that's going to be pretty detrimental, not only to his army meter, but just to the overall circumstances of the battle. And you can see it's actually terrified right now. And this Orc Warboss, let's go ahead and see what the speed difference is. So the Orc Warboss has 100 speed right now, and that's pretty darn quick. And the Gyrocopter here actually only has 90, so the Orc Warboss can actually chase it off the battlefield if he decides to choose so. But I think he decided to just leave the Mangy Marauders as well as the Orc Boar Chariot. Looks like it's just riding around. And does this actually have missile attacks? I don't think it does. Yeah, a lot of chariots do, but I don't think these particular ones do. But the Mangy Marauders are chasing off the Skyhammer, which is very bad because it still has so much ammunition left, and there's so much work it could be doing. But unfortunately, he was able to catch it out. And this Orc Warboss just putting on an absolute clinic in chasing down these Gyrocopters. So it looks like the Greenskin army is getting ready to advance, mostly right now just dealing with the Gyrocopter harass, but the Gyrocopters are shaken, are definitely in very, very bad shape. I'm still very eager to see how the Greenskin player is going to crack this formation on the hill. This is a very, very tough situation up here. He's got a lot of troops. He has these natural terrain advantages, but again, he is losing a lot of resources here, but the Hammer of Gork would have been a very, very useful tool in cracking this formation, and now it's gone. So it's going to be very interesting to see how he decides to do that. The Nasty Skulkers have been discovered here, but this group back here, it looks like they haven't moved. So I still think they're kind of lurking back there. They're eager, they're on the high ground, they're very happy, but if they're able to get a nice charge into the back of these raiders right when the fighting starts, that's going to be very, very essential for disrupting that initial volley of these missiles that do 58 damage and armor piercing. So the raiders, could do quite a bit of damage on some advancing Black Orcs, right out of the gates. So if he's able to shut those down, that'll be quite nice. So the Gyrocopters are taking a bit of damage. It looks like this one is chased off the battlefield, and the Skyhammer also. So the Gyrocopters themselves, if I'm not mistaken, are around 700 or 800 apiece, and the Skyhammer is also very expensive. So, over 1,500 resources already gone for the Dwarf player. Granted, he did get rid of the Hammer of Gork, so it's not a completely, bad trade. And some of these Orc Boar Chariots did take quite a bit of damage as well. So definitely, a little back and forth there, but I would still say that favors the Greenskins. So let's go ahead and fast forward a little bit, as there is a bit of posturing here. But the Greenskin player, once he deals with these Gyrocopters, should more than likely advance here. It'll be very interesting to see how his particular formation does against this terrain. And again, something to take into account if you're trying to be a competitive player, just get to know these maps and, you know, the factions that'll really thrive on certain maps, because again, it can make a huge difference. And it looks like the Hammer of Gork, again, even though I didn't think it would come back, is indeed back and is bombarding this dwarf formation. You can see these Longbeards with the weapons here are taking a bit of damage, so the dwarf player, unfortunately, at this point has to move out, or else he's going to suffer, you know, quite a few volleys from this Hammer of Gork. Although, to be honest, the Hammer of Gork, if you look closely, didn't have much ammunition left, so he potentially could have waited, but still, he probably wants to get in before he takes too many casualties on these Grumbling Guard. So the dwarf player does open up a volley here on this Orc War Boss. He does use Marked by Ulthar, which reduces the missile resistance, also reduces his armor and other stats. And then the Rangers and other troops are starting to shoot at it, and they make okay contact, but the Orc War Boss, again, still has a potion and is in pretty good shape there. The Rangers have now also been discovered, so again, the jig is up to an extent. In the front line, these Chariots charge in here, and they do quite a bit of damage. You can see the Greenskin player just targeting the Grumbling Guard with everything he has, which is very smart, but also the Rangers retaliating and doing quite a bit of damage to those Orc Boars. This Lord back here also dives on these Rangers back here and gets a nice charge, which is going to be very devastating. But thankfully, you know, these Ulthar's Rangers here, they do have armor-piercing melee attacks, if I'm not mistaken. Let's go ahead and take a look at that, and it looks like they do. They have 28 weapon strength with armor-piercing, so they will be able to trade okay, and he does have that negative 16 armor, which is pretty good, but still, this is definitely going to favor the War Boss. In the front line, the Slayers did come to help with the Chariots, and you can see the Dwarf formation is kind of in shambles right now a little bit. The Black Orcs are advancing in a very, very tight formation, and there's a lot of isolated Dawi out here, which is definitely not a good situation. You definitely want them to be relatively unified and engage as a core, but this is going to be very, very tough for the Dwarf player right now, as this Orc War Boss is just absolutely shutting these guys down. On top of that, you can also see the nasty Skulkers coming through the forest, which is going to be pretty tough to deal with as well once they do engage. But he does pull back his Dragback Slayers, who have done a pretty good job of chasing him off. Again, you don't want to mess with these guys with their anti-large bonus, as well as their heavy-hitting melee attacks. The Orc War Boss wisely pulls back. In the front line, you can see the Greenskin debuffs, the Itchy Nuisance from the Night Goblin Shaman, who I did miss earlier. Actually is debuffing this big kind of Dwarven line, and it's a very, very pitched battle, but you can see the Master Rune of Wrath and Rune going off and just do absolutely devastating damage to these Black Orcs, and that is just such a strong ability. So you can see it's a pretty pitched battle, and here the Black Orcs, again, are a little bit stronger than the Longbeards with great weapons as it pertains to melee attack and other stats like that. Also, the Greenskin debuffs are going to make a big difference in that particular battle, so it's going to be a very tough situation. You can see the nasty Skulkers do get back here, and they engage with some of these Slayers here. The Slayers doing a pretty good job fending them off, but still, this is not a situation you want your Slayers in, because again, Slayers, though they're going to cut them to pieces, they're going to take a bit of damage, because guys, they have 0 armor. So even the low kind of weapon damage of these nasty Skulkers and that very high model count is actually trading really well, and you can see these Slayers are actually almost in a way losing this particular battle. You can see the Mangy Marauders are also coming in to assist as well, and are going to get a bit of a charge in, but it looks like they're going to stop and shoot. The Orc War Boss does come in, and he takes a bit of damage from some of these Rangers. They actually put up a very, very good fight, but the Chariots are coming in and are riding around, and it looks like the Dwarven front line, is not necessarily the Dwarven front line, has been compromised in many ways, and man, those Chariots just rode right through those Rangers, and literally just took down 20 to 30% of their HP. And those Chariots are followed up by this Orc War Boss, who's just doing absolute work, just slaying these Rangers, and they're essentially going to rout off this battlefield. They're terrified, but they are also broken, so they're probably going to run for quite some time. And you can see the power bar is now heavily in the Greenskins' favor, and a lot of the Dwarf troops are indeed routing off the battlefield. So that's it for game 1, guys. It was a very, very good battle. Definitely some tight microing as it pertains to the Gyrocopters in the beginning, but he really needed that Skyhammer to kind of change up that front line, because again, the Greenskins with the Itchy Nuisance and the Little Wah were doing a ton of work there. And if you guys take a look, the Skyhammer, it got 16 kills, but I think that was just on Goblin Crews. Now, if that Skyhammer had been able to fly above the Greenskin line and just drop rows and rows of bombs, or even drop the bombs on the nasty Skulkers who flanked in the back line, it probably could have routed them off and freed up those Rangers, or made a substantial difference in the front line. Again, but he was able to kind of push the Hammer of Gork and do a little bit of harass damage to the Chariots, but again, the Gambit did not unfortunately work out. But regardless, it was very well played to both of these guys. Very, very high level players. The Black Orcs here did pretty well for themselves. Obviously going to be a pretty consistent performer for the Greenskins against the Dwarves. And these Orc Boar Chariots did pretty well also. I mean, this one didn't rack up the most kills, but you guys saw that Chariot was just riding around the back line and really disrupting. And one of the big things was that the Dwarf player was forced from his high ground position. So if he was able to kind of secure dominance with these Gyrocopters and other things like this, and then force the Greenskin player to come on that lip, wherein all his black orcs would have been trapped on that one kind of opening there and could have dropped bombs on top of them. It could have been a very, very different battle. So again, a lot of circumstantial things, but it was definitely very cool army competitions. I really liked Ondjage's use of the orc boar chariots. It was cool seeing those guys in action. Of course, the Mangy Marauders, a very, very good tool against the Dwarves. Just one of my favorite units. I definitely overlooked it for a long time, but they did pretty well. And despite all that, the Hammer of Gork racked up 44 kills. So quite good there. So definitely very, very well played over there. As far as Brent Verlin's troops, the Grumbling Guard took a beating early. The Hammer of Gork started to fire in at them, and also just a lot of shock damage taken from those initial chariots in the beginning. The Longbeard's great weapons performed pretty well against Black Orcs. I mean, this is a pretty respectable kill count against Black Orcs, as they are elite infantry. The Miners and other fodder units, again, kind of just got cut to pieces by the chariots in the beginning, but still, the Slayers did pretty well in the back line, but you guys saw them trading with those nasty Skulkers. I mean, these guys got 29 and 56 kills. I believe these were the group, and most of these 29 kills were probably all in Slayers, which is really, really good for that, for how much you're paying for those nasty Skulkers. So it was a very, very fun game to watch. So again, great game between Ondjage and SK10A Brent Verlin. And again, that was game 1 in the Total Warhammer Cup number 2. And the next cast in this particular series will indeed be game number 2. So stay tuned, guys. I hope you enjoyed that cast, and more good stuff coming your way.